My sister overheard I got pregnant after 3 years of IVF. She unleashed a harassment campaign so terrifying, I had to flee to another state with my baby. And what happened when she violated the restraining order left everyone speechless. I'm 33 years old. I work in digital marketing. And after 3 years of trying to get pregnant with IVF treatments, I finally succeeded. But what should have been the happiest moment of my life turned into a nightmare thanks to my younger sister Morgan. And things escalated so much that we ended up having to move to another state just to be safe. I know it sounds dramatic, like over the top, but by the time you finish reading this, you'll understand why we had to go to that extreme. I guess I should start by explaining a bit about what our family was like before all this. I'm the oldest of two sisters. Morgan is 29, and we grew up in a pretty quiet town where everyone knows everyone. Our parents, Brian and Jennifer, were always good parents. You know, they gave us everything we needed, supported us in our studies and all that. But looking back, I think there were some signs I should have noticed earlier. Morgan was always the more dramatic one, the one who needed to be the center of attention at every family gathering, every dinner, every event. When we were kids, I thought it was normal, like just her personality. But over the years, that intensified in a way that wasn't healthy. I was always quieter, more reserved, and I think that made my parents unconsciously put more attention on Morgan because she was always demanding it. If I got good grades, great. But if Morgan got a B-, it was a whole drama and my parents had to console her for hours. If I got a new job, good for me. But if Morgan had a bad day at work, the whole family had to stop and listen about how terrible her boss was during the entire dinner. You know what I mean? It was like her problems were always more important than anything good that happened to me. I met my husband Eric like 7 years ago. We got married 5 years ago. And from the beginning, he noticed this family dynamic. He would tell me, "It's not normal for your sister to act like that when you talk about your achievements." Or, "Did you notice that your parents changed the subject when you mentioned your promotion to ask Morgan about her new dating app?" At first I defended it. Like, "No, that's just Morgan. She's just dramatic." But Eric insisted there was something deeper there. And honestly, he was right. But I was so used to that pattern that I didn't even see it as problematic. So, we started trying to have a baby. At first we thought it would be easy. You know, we just stopped being careful and assumed that in a few months we'd be pregnant. But 6 months passed, then a year, and nothing. We went to the doctor and they told us I had some fertility issues. Nothing impossible to overcome, but we'd probably need medical help. So we started with fertility treatments. First basic stuff, then IVF. And let me tell you, IVF is brutal, physically and emotionally brutal. The hormones, the injections, the constant medical appointments, the waiting, the disappointment when it doesn't work. We went through 3 years of this, 3 years of hopes and disappointments, of spending thousands of dollars we barely had, of watching Eric so frustrated but trying to stay strong for me. During all this time, I told my family what we were going through, but very superficially. I didn't give them specific details of each cycle or each treatment because, honestly, it was too painful to talk about it constantly. And besides, I knew Morgan would find a way to make the conversation turn toward her. There was literally one time I mentioned at a family dinner that we'd had a failed cycle and I was devastated. And Morgan immediately started talking about how she was also going through something difficult because her boyfriend at the time hadn't responded to a message in 3 hours. My parents, of course, turned to console her while I just sat there processing my pain in silence. Fast forward to like 8 months ago. We had done another IVF cycle. The 6th, I think. I'd actually lost count, honestly. And this time it worked. I took a home pregnancy test first. I couldn't wait for the medical appointment. And when I saw those 2 lines, I cried there in the bathroom for like 20 minutes. Eric came home from work. He's a civil engineer, works at a construction company. And when I showed him the test, he was in shock, like literally stood there unable to speak for a full minute. And then he also started crying. After 3 years of trying, of failures, of pain, we had finally done it. We decided to be cautious with the news. We waited for them to do blood tests, and the first ultrasound to confirm everything was okay before telling anyone. When it came time to tell my family, we decided to do it privately, just with my parents first. We went to their house on a Sunday, sat down with them in the living room, and told them. My mom started crying with happiness. My dad hugged us. It was a very emotional and beautiful moment. We specifically asked them not to say anything yet, because we wanted to wait. until we got past the first trimester before making a general announcement. But we told them they could know because they're my parents and we wanted to share that happiness with them. They completely agreed and promised not to say anything. Now, this is where everything starts falling apart. Turns out, Morgan had announced her engagement like 2 weeks before I found out I was pregnant. Her boyfriend, Jordan, a pretty normal and nice guy honestly, had proposed, and she obviously made a whole spectacle on social media. Multiple posts, professional photo shoot, the whole show. My parents were excited for her. I was also happy for her, honestly. And she was planning a big engagement party to officially announce the wedding and celebrate with the whole extended family. The party was scheduled for 2 weeks after Eric and I told my parents about my pregnancy. At no point did we think about stealing Morgan's spotlight. We hadn't even considered mentioning my pregnancy at her party because, 1, we were still in the early weeks and wanted to be cautious, and 2, it was her moment, and we completely respected that. Eric even told me before going to the party, "Please don't mention anything about the baby. Today is Morgan's day." And I totally agreed. The party was at an event hall that my parents helped pay for. There were like 100 people, nice decorations, food, music, the whole thing. I was genuinely happy for Morgan, really. Despite all our differences, I always wanted the best for her. Halfway through the party, my mom took me to a more private corner of the room because she wanted to ask me how I was feeling with the pregnancy, if I had nausea, that kind of thing. We were talking quietly, literally whispering. And I was telling her that yes, I had a bit of morning sickness, but that overall I felt good. I didn't see Morgan approaching. I had no idea she was nearby, but apparently she overheard part of our conversation. Nothing immediate happened at that moment. The party continued normally. Morgan gave a speech thanking everyone for coming. Jordan also spoke. There were toasts. We danced. It was a nice party. Eric and I left around 11 at night, tired but happy that everything had gone well. The next day, like 9 in the morning, I get a call from Morgan and she's hysterical, screaming over the phone about how dare I try to steal her moment, that she heard I was pregnant, and that I had clearly planned it to overshadow her. I was completely confused, trying to explain to her that no, I hadn't announced anything at her party, that I had only had a private conversation with Mom, and that besides we weren't even planning to tell anyone else for several weeks. But Morgan didn't want to listen. She kept screaming, saying that I had always tried to be better than her, that I had always been the parents' favorite, which is ironic considering my parents always paid more attention to her, and that I was a horrible person for ruining her special day. Eventually, she hung up, leaving me in total shock. Eric asked me what had happened, and when I told him, he was furious. Like angrier than I'd seen him in a long time. He wanted to call Morgan and tell her exactly what he thought of her behavior, but I asked him not to because I didn't want to make things worse, and I thought that maybe Morgan just needed time to calm down and process her emotions, that later she would realize she was overreacting. But it didn't end there. Morgan started ignoring my calls and messages. She told our parents that I had ruined her party by announcing my pregnancy to everyone, which was completely false. And although my parents tried to explain to her that that hadn't happened, she insisted we were all liars and that we were conspiring against her. It was like watching someone lose connection with reality. Seriously. 2 weeks later, my parents organized a family dinner to try to resolve things. Morgan agreed to come, Jordan was also there, and we thought we could finally talk like adults and clear up the misunderstanding. We arrived at my parents' house, sat down in the dining room, and at first everything seemed okay. Like tense but civil. My dad started talking, trying to mediate, explaining that no one had tried to steal Morgan's spotlight and that we were all happy about her engagement, and then Morgan exploded. She started screaming that I had always been the perfect daughter, that I always got everything I wanted, that my parents loved me more, and that now I was using my pregnancy to get attention. I tried to stay calm. I really tried. I explained to her again that I hadn't announced anything at her party, that it had been a private conversation, but it was like talking to a wall. Jordan was trying to calm her down, taking her arm and telling her to relax, but she pushed him away. Then Morgan said to me, "You know what? Come with me for a moment. I need to talk to you privately." I thought maybe we were finally going to have a real conversation, so I followed her. She led me to my parents' basement. You know, that kind of half-finished, half-storage basement that a lot of houses have. We went down the stairs, and when we got down there, she started saying horrible things to me, like she wished I would lose the baby, that I didn't deserve to be a mother, that I was selfish. I was in shock. Literally couldn't believe what I was hearing come out of my sister's mouth. I tried to leave, turn around, and go up the stairs, but Morgan blocked my way. I said, "Morgan, please let me pass. I don't want to continue this conversation." But she wouldn't move. I started walking toward the stairs anyway because I thought she would step aside. But when I got to the first step, she pushed me. Not hard, but enough that I lost my balance. I tried to grab the railing but couldn't reach it, and I fell backwards onto the basement floor. The fall wasn't from very high, maybe 3 or 4 feet because I had only gone up 1 step, but I fell, badly, and felt a sharp pain in my back and abdomen. I lay there for a second, trying to process what had happened, and Morgan was standing at the top of the stairs looking at me. I yelled at her to go up and tell everyone I needed help, that I had fallen, but instead she left the basement and closed the door. I heard her lock it from the outside. I was left there alone, on the floor, in pain, 8 weeks pregnant, completely terrified that something had happened to the baby. I started screaming for help. My parents' basement is pretty acoustically isolated because my dad had partially soundproofed it years ago when he wanted to make a music room, so I wasn't sure if anyone could hear me upstairs. I screamed for what seemed like hours, but was probably like 15 or 20 minutes. Eventually, I heard footsteps upstairs, and the basement door opened. It was Eric, who had started to worry when Morgan and I didn't come back from our private conversation and had gone to look for us. He found me on the floor, obviously upset and in pain, and he lost it. He helped me up very carefully, asked me 1,000 times if I was okay, if the baby was okay, and I could only cry because I didn't know if the baby was okay. We went up the stairs, and when we got upstairs, Morgan was sitting at the table as if nothing had happened, eating dessert calmly. Eric confronted her immediately, asking her what the hell she had done, why she had left me locked in the basement after I fell. And she acted like she had no idea what he was talking about, saying that I had gone down alone and that she had come up because she thought I wanted to be alone. My parents were confused, trying to understand what was happening. I explained through tears that Morgan had pushed me and locked me in the basement, but Morgan flatly denied it, saying I was making things up to victimize myself and ruin her family dinner. Jordan was looking at her with an expression I can't describe, like between shock and disappointment, as if he was seeing Morgan with new eyes. Eric said we were going to the hospital immediately, that I needed to have the baby checked. And although my parents offered to come with us, we told them no, that we just needed to go the 2 of us. During the whole drive to the hospital, I cried, praying in my head that the baby would be okay, thinking about the 3 years of treatments, the pain, the effort, and that it all could have been lost because of Morgan. We arrived at the ER around 10 at night. I explained the situation, that I was 8 weeks pregnant and had had a fall. They did an emergency ultrasound, and thank God, the baby was okay. The heart was beating strong. There was no bleeding, no signs of complications. The doctor said I had been very lucky, that falls in the first trimester can be very dangerous, but that in this case everything seemed perfectly fine. They monitored me for a few more hours to be sure and then let us go home with instructions to rest for a few days. The next morning, my parents came to our house. They looked tired, worried, and told me they needed to talk to us. Apparently, after we left last night, Jordan had confronted Morgan about what happened in the basement. He had told her he knew she was lying, that he had noticed her erratic and obsessive behavior in recent weeks, and that what she had done was unforgivable. Morgan had another breakdown, screaming and crying, and eventually had admitted that yes, she had pushed me, but that it wasn't that hard, and that I was exaggerating. My parents were devastated. My mom was crying while apologizing to me, saying she didn't know Morgan was so bad, that they should have seen the signs earlier. My dad was quiet, visibly angry, but controlling himself. They told us they had made a decision. They were going to cut off all financial support to Morgan, which meant the wedding they were helping pay for would no longer have their money, and the honeymoon trip they were going to give them was also canceled. Additionally, they had told her she wasn't welcome in their house until she sought professional help and genuinely apologized to me. I felt horrible. Honestly. Yes. Morgan had done something terrible, unforgivable even, but I didn't want to be the reason my parents distanced themselves from her, or why her wedding was ruined. I told this to my parents, but my dad was very firm, saying this wasn't my fault, that Morgan had crossed a line that can't be uncrossed, and that as parents, it was their responsibility to make her face the consequences of her actions. I thought maybe this would be enough for Morgan to realize the gravity of what she had done, that maybe she would seek help, apologize, and we could start healing as a family. But no, things only got worse from there. Morgan started spreading rumors all over our town. She told relatives, friends, acquaintances that I had faked the pregnancy scare for attention, that I had exaggerated a minor fall to victimize myself, and that I was trying to ruin her wedding because I was jealous that she was happy. Some of these relatives would call me or write me messages asking if it was true, and I had to explain to them over and over what really happened, showing them the medical reports from the hospital, trying to defend my version of the facts. It was exhausting and humiliating. 2 weeks after the basement incident, I was at my house one afternoon, working from my computer. My boss had let me work from home for a few weeks while I recovered from the scare, when I heard someone knocking on the door insistently. I opened it, and it was Morgan. She looked terrible, like she hadn't showered in days, greasy hair, wrinkled clothes. Before I could say anything, she came in pushing me aside. I told her to leave, that she wasn't welcome in my house, but she ignored everything and went straight to the living room. I had a frame on the wall with a photo of the ultrasound. Something Eric had put there with a lot of love after we confirmed the baby was okay, and Morgan grabbed it and threw it on the floor hard. The frame broke, the glass was shattered into pieces everywhere. Then she turned to me and said, "I curse you. I hope you lose that baby. You don't deserve to be a mother. You're a manipulative bitch." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I took out my phone and called Eric, who was at work but told me he was coming home immediately. I also threatened to call the police if Morgan didn't leave, and finally she left, but not without first telling me that this wasn't over. When Eric arrived like 15 minutes later, he found me sitting on the couch surrounded by broken glass, crying. He was furious. Wanted to go find Morgan and confront her, but I just wanted him to stay with me because I was terrified. That night we called my parents and told them what had happened. We also told them we were going to consider getting a restraining order against Morgan if this continued. My parents completely understood and supported us 100%. They told Morgan she had crossed every possible boundary and that if she continued harassing me, she would face legal consequences. A few relatively quiet weeks passed. Morgan didn't try to contact me directly, but I knew from my parents that Jordan had broken up with her. Apparently, Morgan's behavior had become increasingly obsessive. She constantly checked her phone to see if I had any posts on social media, talked about me all the time, blaming me for all her problems, and Jordan just couldn't take it anymore. The breakup sank her even deeper into her spiral. One day, my parents called me upset. Morgan had gone to their house when they weren't there, had used her emergency key to get in. My parents didn't even know she still had it, and had destroyed my old room. She had broken photos, thrown furniture, spray-painted the walls saying horrible things about me. When my parents got home and saw the disaster, they called the police and filed a report. Morgan was arrested but was released on bail a few hours later. My parents changed the locks on their house and officially told her she was no longer welcome. From that moment, they adopted what they call low contact with her, just occasional messages asking if she's okay, if she needs anything, but without allowing the situation to affect their relationship with me or their excitement about their future grandson. Fast forward a few months. My pregnancy progressed well despite all the stress. Eric and I decided not to post anything about the baby on social media so as not to give Morgan more ammunition. We had a small baby shower, just with very close friends and Eric's family. My parents were there, and it was a beautiful day without drama. I gave birth to a healthy 7.5-pound baby at 39 weeks. It was a natural birth. Everything went perfectly. And when Eric and I saw our son for the first time after 3 years of fighting for him, I cried more than I had cried in my entire life. He was perfect, absolutely perfect, with tiny fingers and a wrinkled and beautiful little face. We named him Alexander, a name we had chosen years ago. We were in the hospital for 2 days and then went home to start our life as a family of 3. The first few weeks were exhausting like they are for all first-time parents, but also incredibly happy. Eric was an incredible father. He would wake up with me at night, change diapers, support me in everything. But then the messages started. They were from unknown numbers, text messages saying horrible things about Alexander, threatening to hurt him, saying I didn't deserve to have him. At first I thought they were random internet trolls. Maybe someone Morgan had told her version of events to. But the messages were too specific, mentioning details that only someone close could know. I took the messages to the police. They investigated, and although the numbers were from prepaid phones and couldn't be traced directly to Morgan, the behavior pattern was clear. A detective told me that unfortunately, without direct evidence that Morgan was sending the messages, they couldn't do much, but to document everything just in case. The messages continued for weeks. Sometimes there were 5 or 6 a day. Sometimes days would pass without anything. Every time my phone rang with an unknown number, my heart would race. I started having anxiety attacks. I would wake up at night checking that all the doors and windows were locked. I didn't want to take Alexander out of the house for fear that Morgan was watching us. Eric was very worried about me and Alexander. He suggested we consider moving, starting over in another place where Morgan couldn't find us. His family lives in another state, like 8 hours away, and he told me maybe we could move there, that his company had an office in that city and he could request a transfer. At first I resisted because it meant leaving my parents, my job, my friends, everything I knew. But every day that passed and every threatening message I received made me realize that maybe we had no other choice. Then something happened that was the straw that broke the camel's back. My mother-in-law, a very sweet lady named Patricia who lives in the state where Eric's family is, called me one day very worried. She told me she had received an anonymous letter with photographs and evidence that I was a negligent mother, that I left Alexander alone, that I used drugs, all kinds of horrible lies. The letter urged Patricia to contact social services because her grandson was in danger. Patricia, who knows and loves me, immediately knew it was false and called me to let me know. But the idea that Morgan was now trying to involve social services, that she could potentially put my custody of Alexander at risk even temporarily while it was investigated, was absolutely terrifying. That night, Eric and I sat down and made the decision. We would move. The process was quick once we decided to do it. Eric requested the transfer, and it was approved in 2 weeks. I quit my job, something that was painful because I had worked there for 5 years and liked it, but my priority was to protect my son. We didn't tell almost anyone we were moving except my parents, who, although they were sad we were leaving, completely understood and supported us 100%. My parents told me they would make sure Morgan didn't know where we had gone. They wouldn't tell her anything about our move, and if she asked, they would simply say we had decided to keep our life private. They also told me they were considering cutting contact with Morgan completely because her behavior had become unsustainable, and they couldn't continue being part of that. We packed all our things in 2 weeks. We sold some furniture, put the rest in a moving truck, and one Saturday morning very early, before dawn, we left. I literally felt like we were fleeing, like a suspense movie, but it was our reality. The trip to our new state was a long 8 hours with Alexander in his car seat, but Eric and I took turns driving, and we arrived in the afternoon. Eric's family was waiting for us with a house they had helped find, prepared food, and lots of love. I started crying when we arrived, a mixture of relief, sadness at leaving my previous life behind, and gratitude for having such an incredible in-law family. Shortly after we moved, my parents told me that Morgan had violated a restraining order that Jordan, her ex-fiancé, had against her. Apparently, she had gone to his work trying to talk to him despite being prohibited from approaching, and he called the police. This time, Morgan faced more serious charges and had to go to court. I don't know exactly what happened in legal terms because by that point I had completely blocked everything related to her, but my parents told me she was receiving mandatory professional help as part of her sentence. It's been like 4 months since we moved. Eric is happy in his new position at work. I got a remote digital marketing job that allows me to be home with Alexander most of the time, and we're starting to make friends in our new city. Alexander is growing so fast, he's already smiling, starting to make little sounds, and every day I fall more in love with him. My parents come visit us once a month. The trip is long, but they say it's totally worth it to see their grandson. The other night, Alexander woke up crying at 3 in the morning, something normal at his age, and as I rocked him in the rocking chair in his room, looking out the window at our new quiet street in a neighborhood where nobody knows us and Morgan doesn't know we exist, I felt a peace I hadn't felt in almost a year. Yes, I miss my friends from my previous city. I miss my old routine. And sometimes I feel guilty for having had to distance my parents from their grandson geographically. But when I think about the alternative, about living with that constant fear, about worrying every day about my son's safety, I know we made the right decision. I don't know what will happen with Morgan long term. My parents say she's in therapy and in a mental health management program, but they also say she refuses to acknowledge she did anything wrong, that she continues to blame me for all her problems. Maybe someday she'll seek real help and be able to heal, or maybe not. But that's no longer my responsibility. My responsibility is to protect my family and give Alexander the safe and happy childhood he deserves. Sometimes I wonder if all this could have been avoided if we had handled things differently. If my parents had set firmer boundaries with Morgan from when she was a child. If I had confronted her narcissistic behavior years ago, instead of just accepting it as her personality. But I can't change the past. I can only control the present and the future. And right now, sitting on the patio of our new house with Eric drinking coffee, while Alexander sleeps in his stroller, looking at the mountains in the distance that are so different from the flat landscape of my hometown, I feel grateful. Grateful for my husband who never hesitated to do what was necessary to protect us. Grateful for my parents who chose to support me even though it meant losing the relationship with their other daughter. Grateful to have a healthy son after fighting so hard for him, and grateful for this second chance to live without fear. I don't know if I'll ever have a relationship with Morgan again. Honestly, right now, I can't even imagine what that would be like. But I do know we did the right thing by moving away, by prioritizing our safety and our peace of mind.